this group is up to the challenges. We can create a future where families feel safe sending their child to school on the bus, businesses can operate without paying for private security, and city can respond to public safety crisis in a timely way so that those who are suffering can find the care that they need.
Well, that's your new public safety chair on the Seattle City Council, Bob Kettle, who's talking about his goals ahead, including a strategy of 6 pillars, which is somehow not a chess gambit. We're going to look into that. We're going to look into some damaging allegations about the Seattle Police Department and how it treats its female officers. We're also checking out Governor Inslee's latest push for climate alignment with other states in the U.S. and Canada, even in the face of an initiative campaign that would tear his carbon pricing plan apart. All this and more this week on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are mine. And I am joined by David Croman, City Hall reporter for the Seattle Times. David, I think I got to call you out on this one. I saw you posting about cat cafes. You said the best way to keep you out of a cafe is to fill it with cats. What's the deal, man? What do we got here?
Mostly I'm just allergic and find them a little bit gross, if I'm being honest. So, God, good for everybody who loves a good cat cafe. I just will never set foot in one.
I got you. I won't meet you at the Meowtropolitan anytime soon. Loud and clear. Got the message there. Thank you, David. Thank you also to our background noise sponsor, City Grind Espresso on the first floor of City Hall. Thanks also to our show patrons. Carl, this week is for you, my man, one of our longest standing patrons. Thank you, sir. And why can't the rest of you be like your brother, Carl? If you can pledge just $5 a month to the show, we will be working with you to answer questions about City Hall. Plus, you can access Patrons First podcast before anybody else, and that is our thanks to you. Really appreciate the support. A big thanks also to Converge Media. The video version of this podcast is on Converge. It's happening Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock. All right, off we go. It is time for Right Here, Right Now. Okay, David, we are still in beginning mode for the majority of our new city council members and their committees, including Councilmember Bob Kettle and his leadership of the Public Safety Committee. Councilmember Kettle held his first committee meeting this week, and he's laid out this idea of 6 pillars addressing the permissive environment, as he put it. In case there's a test later, folks, here they are. Police staffing, finding new legal tools, as he puts it, closing unsecured buildings, graffiti remediation, public health, and collaboration with the state. Sounds great. But David, we both know that public safety was a big reason behind why Kettle and many other council members in this last election were elected. What do you make of the pillars? Are they pillars to be pilloried? Are they pillars to be praised? I'm probably out of P words at that point, but what do you think?
I think it's a clear break from previous councils. Even the term, I think he put it, pillars, what is it? Addressing the capital P permissive environment.
Yes, right.
Which, I think the term broken windows policing is thrown around a lot and it has a heavy weight to it. I do think it is at its most literal and kind of most academic. I mean, it is kind of this to an extent, which is just the theory that small things lead to big things. And okay. if you leave environment for small things like, as he points out, vacant buildings or graffiti, or it sort of leads to this larger environment that allows, crime to flourish or whatever it might be. And, what stands out to me is kind of what's not here. He doesn't talk too much about, anti-violence, like community-based programs or things like that. I mean, this is a very law enforcement focused set of pillars. And, I think legal tools, just kind of talking about what judges are doing with people and what lawyers are doing with people when they come in the door. So, at the end of the day, this is, I would say, a bit more kind of pumping up what people know of as the criminal justice system. Yeah. It does seem that way. And I was kind of looking at these pillars almost as goals somehow in some way. And I was trying to figure out which one would be the most difficult to achieve. I'm really leaning towards this idea of hiring hundreds of police officers, which I know Councilmember Kettle and many other council members have been talking about. And you can blame the prior council as much as you want on this one, folks. People just are not eager to take this job of police officer anywhere in the country. Talk to me about this issue, David, this police hiring thing.
if this new council really wants to hang its hat on that, I don't know. They could be disappointed by the end of the year. Those officers aren't coming in by the hundreds. They're just not.
No, they're not. And it appears that the ratio, the speed at which the department is shrinking has slowed a bit, but it is still shrinking. You know, more people are leaving than are being hired. I think the risk of, and maybe we've talked about this before, I think the risk of putting too much weight on the comments of the past council is it sort of forgets that these were issues that existed before 2019, 2018. You know, I remember covering Ed Murray's making a speech that he was going to add 200 new officers, and they instead lost officers. You know, they have been losing more officers than they've been hiring for many years before anyone had heard the term defund the police. So it is a stubborn issue. You know, I think there's money behind more kind of advertising marketing efforts. It's a question mark how well those are working. I think a lot of weight is being put on a new contract, and getting a new contract and increasing pay. You know, the risk there is you're so desperate for a new contract that you give up some of the accountability stuff that the previous city halls have cared a lot about. I also think there's a risk that when you sign a new contract, you know, a lot of officers are going to get a lot of back pay for years that they've worked.
Yeah, we're talking about SPOG here. Yeah, SPOG has not had a contract for going on 4 years now. I mean, their last one expired in 2020. But I hear what you're saying. That could be a big dent for a city council that already has a pretty big budget deficit to consider here.
Well, and more than that, I think there's a non-zero chance that there are officers who are looking at the door and are waiting for this contract so that they can collect all of this back pay that they're owed and then go out the door. You know, I don't know that. I think there's a lot of weight being put on this contract as a recruitment tool. I think there is a non-zero chance that it could also speed up exits from the Seattle Police Department. So I just think it's a really complicated issue. I think it's a really complicated issue that is, you know, again, this predates the 2020 protest era. This is a challenge for all departments. And I think 1,400 sounds like a number that's still quite far off.
Yeah, and great observation there about that back pay. It'll be really interesting to see what comes out of this, because I've heard a lot of council members talk about that contract for the Seattle Police Officers Guild as something they really want to accomplish this year. So we'll see what comes out of that. A little bit more on public safety news and the police in particular. A headline kind of buried at the end of last week, a new report commissioned by the Seattle Police Department regarding women in the SPD. Turns out those women are feeling pigeonholed, sexually harassed in some cases, and held back from promotion, among other concerns. This is the new 30 by 30 report. The SPD's goal is to have women make up 30% of its sworn personnel by the year 2030. And we're hearing more about this report with two longtime female SPD officers suing their employer. We've got Detective Denise Cookie Bolden says she was discriminated against due to her race and gender. Deanna Nolette, former assistant chief, says there's a culture of misogyny at SPD. And David, a few weeks ago, we touched on the lawsuits during the podcast here, but now we have this report. What do you make of this, seeing these allegations now in black and white?
I mean, yeah, it's a problem for SPD. I mean, especially because I think what we heard a lot was, I mean, we've been hearing a lot about sort of trying to create a new department, a more diverse department, one with more women, more people of color. If you're a woman and you're interested in becoming a police officer, and you're kind of looking around and you Google Seattle Police Department women, now this is going to come up. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, right.
It's a bad look for the police department. And I mean, you know, beyond the sort of implications of what it means to be a woman in the Seattle Police Department, it's not good if for a department that in theory wants to hire more women.
Yeah, I want to hire more people in general here. And I have seen Chief Diaz speaking to a number of media outlets about this, saying this report is not necessarily all a bad thing, could help identify more of the problems at SPD. He's very much denying that there's a culture of misogyny, but I guess I'm trying to figure out how the SPD works with this information from this report going forward? Are we going to see a change? Are we going to see more lawsuits? I mean, this was a report that the SPD commission, they wanted to learn more about what was going on with women within their department, and now they have this information. So what's next, I guess, for the SPD? How do they use this information?
Yeah, I don't know. I think if they had a good answer to that, they would be using that already. I mean, Chief Diaz himself is the subject of a lawsuit from a woman who felt like she was discriminated against. So, I don't know what they do with it. I think it's, these things tend to open floodgates. One lawsuit leads to the next, and people realize, hey, they might have some power and a voice here, and they tend to want to use it. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more allegations and lawsuits that come out of this.
Yeah, we'll have to see when the next shoe drops on that part of it in terms of the legal pieces that are happening with the SPD. But this report, definitely something that the SPD is keeping an eye on and the chief is responding to this week. All right, well, we've got a lot more ahead here. Coming up, a spotlight on what is happening in Olympia, especially when it comes to carbon pricing and what that all could mean with a watershed moment initiative heading our way on the ballot. We're going to have some details on. Now hear this. Well, it is crunch time in the legislature this week as lawmakers try to get their bills out of the House of Origin. That cutoff is happening here. And in the governor's office, Jay Inslee has been talking more about merging our state's carbon market with California's, possibly other states. This is a critical part of the Climate Commitment Act. As the governor explained during a budget preview event just a few months ago, polluters have to buy allowances at auctions for each metric ton of greenhouse gas they emit. So if more states band together, the logic goes, maybe even with markets in Canada too, that could lead to lower prices for these so-called carbon allowances.
This idea of linkage, where we can link our market, our carbon market, to California and Quebec, one of the reasons we're doing that is we think this can ameliorate those wild pricing swings that the oil industry has been foisting upon us. This is a good idea. I hope it gets done.
So, David, the state Senate passed a measure on this week. Dems said yes. Republicans said no to Senate Bill 6058. This bill is not a commitment necessarily, but it does set up a structure so that states can talk to each other about possibly banding together. Any move in that direction would have to go back to the legislature ultimately. But I think the big concern now is, David, we've got this initiative headed toward the ballot in November, I-2117, that could actually overturn the Climate Commitment Act. So why even bother with a bill like this at the state level? What do you think, David?
I think to an extent it's maybe I don't know if it's a political acknowledgement. It might be a political acknowledgement that I think this carbon pricing system has consistently so far brought in a lot more money than they were expecting it to.
Right.
Which is good for the budget writers. But, when you're seeing gas prices kind of go up and down, they're down right now. But, it's hard to get vision into exactly why gas prices are doing what they're doing. But
Always,
it is being used. The carbon auction is being used as a cudgel by particularly Republicans who want to reframe it as a tax. And so I think what the legislature is doing to an extent is kind of in advance of this initiative. It's a bit of an acknowledgement that they're willing to kind of revisit and make some tweaks. They're not totally wed to the original formula. I think with the hope of, again, sort of acknowledging some of the frustrations that some people are feeling while trying to save it simultaneously.
Right. Always so difficult to get that causal relationship of how gas prices end up where they are. I've tried going down that path as a reporter many times. It's I know our state legislatures had trouble with it too. It's not easy. But there was another wrinkle here I thought was very interesting, David, as reported in the Washington State Standard. There's still a question as to whether this Senate bill we're talking about this week could be seen as a competing bill with Initiative 2117. If it is, then maybe this ends up on the ballot as well. And I just thought about this, David, because I am not accusing voters of not being smart enough, but this is a very confusing enough issue for lawmakers who spend a lot of time on this. I was just trying to think that through. What happens if a bill like this one from the Senate, somehow ends up in front of voters along with this Initiative 2117? It just sounds like a mess to me.
No, and if you're running a ballot measure, you want it to be as clear and simple as possible. So asking people their opinions on tying carbon pricing to other markets like Quebec or whatever it might be.
Right.
I don't know. I would be surprised if anyone wants that to be the outcome.
Right. They'd probably have to print it in French. I don't even know where to go with that.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot going on with that. And I think you're right. It's just this matter of, at least from the initiative writer's perspective, they're looking for something that's clear and simple. But I have to say, this is something that the legislature might consider as they move forward here. I guess we'll have to see. But I think you're right. This is one of those moves by the legislature to at least recognize that this concern is going on from some of these bigger companies, and this effort to try to lower these carbon allowance prices might be a nod in that direction. So more to come on that one for sure. Let me move on to another issue that you were writing about for the Times here, David, something that actually could end up on the ballot, a measure to fund Seattle's new social housing developer. So Seattle voted yes on social housing last year to set up this developer to build more affordable housing for people making up to 120% of the area median income. This is I-135 we're talking about. So supporters of 135 say we want a stable funding model, and their proposal is a payroll tax on businesses in the city with workers who make more than $1 million a year. This could yield $50 million per year for the developer, the campaign says, to produce possibly 2,000 units over the next 10 years. My big question to start here, David, what is the appetite for another payroll tax in Seattle? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. There will be strong opposition to it if it makes the ballot, and that complicates things. I mean, a lot of the property tax levies that Seattleites vote on tend to not have opposition, especially since Faye Garneau died. She was kind of the financier of any opposition to these property tax levies.
Right.
Since then, there has just not really been any pushback. This one will have a lot of pushback and well-financed pushback from, if not the chamber specifically, sort of satellite, people and organizations in and around the chamber, because they are flatly opposed to this. Whereas business tends to be in favor of a lot of the property tax levies. So, on the other hand, taxing large corporations that have had huge impact on Seattle has always been a fairly popular stance in Seattle. It's why 2019 was such a successful election for progressive city council candidates, is because people were voting against Amazon and Amazon's involvement in the city. And I think also the fact that the Jumpstart payroll tax was a little controversial as it was being passed, and now since it's in law, we have hardly heard a peep of, except for from the chamber, we haven't heard nobody's using that payroll tax in opposition campaigns against people, because I think it's generally seen as a popular tax that you're taking from Amazon, you're not taking from your local grocery store. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's sort of a question of, do Seattleites' appetite for taxing corporations outweigh the inevitable well-funded opposition campaign that's going to exist against this?
Yeah, I guess, and you wrote about this too, while the payroll tax for Jumpstart does have exceptions for grocery stores and hospitals, things of that nature, it doesn't look like this measure does. I thought that was a subtle but kind of important difference here. Do you think that plays a factor in this at all?
Yeah, it might. I mean, that was a factor in the head tax debate of
whatever
it was 2017.
Yep.
I mean, that was kind of what doomed that tax, because you had, the owners of Awajimai's beloved local grocery store up there testifying against it, saying it's going to put them out of business. That one, though, was a kind of more flat payroll tax on revenue. And, revenue is not the same as profit. And grocery stores have big revenue but small profit. So that's why it was seen as it's going to harm grocery stores. This one is on excess earners, which is, so, the backers of this make the point that if you're a grocery store and paying somebody over $1 million, you're probably doing okay. I don't know if they have data on which, if there are grocery stores. And I also don't know, if you're talking about Kroger, for example, or Safeway, I don't know if this would include corporate people at Safeway or Kroger. I would guess not. I guess they'd have to live and work in Washington. So there's still some kind of details I don't understand fully about this, but yeah, I mean, it's another kind of step. I guess opening another front in the city's affordable housing crisis is going to be the main argument for it, and that corporations owe a little bit more to help that. That'll be the argument for it, at least.
Yeah, and I've talked to you before about how this whole social housing developer fits or maybe doesn't fit within the grander scheme of housing within the city of Seattle. Yes, voters approved this, but we never really heard about the funding mechanism for it. I guess it turns into something for me where, okay, we voted for this last year, and then we voted for the housing levy for the city of Seattle. And wait, now we have to vote on this again in terms of paying for it?
Right.
I wonder about that and how people will perceive that if indeed this is a measure that makes the ballot this November.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's why this campaign is really pushing hard to get this on the November 24 ballot, because turnout's going to be huge. There's going to be a lot of anti-Donald Trump fervor, I'm sure, in Seattle, and therefore maybe that kind of boosts progressives. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to bet against Seattleites voting for a tax for something that they perceive as a public good.
For anything, right?
I don't know that I've ever witnessed one fail as a reporter. So, but this is a bit different than some of those other votes, which were property tax levies. This is something that business in Seattle sees as a threat, and people are kind of sensitive to that right now. I think because of the pandemic, they're concerned about the health of business in Seattle.
Yeah, and I think the other piece of this too is a very new city council trying to wrap its head around this idea. A council that's faced with a pretty big budget gap too. Do you have a feel yet for how this new council regards this social housing measure? It's kind of one of those background issues, but I don't know. It could turn into a real foreground issue if this gets on the ballot in November.
Yeah, I haven't heard from them specifically, and I think there might be some rules against them commenting on it. I don't
specifically on ballot measures, right? They're not supposed to do that
from the dais, at least. But the fact that they're running this campaign at all kind of tells you what you need to know, which is, there is an avenue in which this campaign could push the city council to just pass this payroll tax. The fact that they're doing an initiative is an acknowledgement that that's not going to happen, that this city council would not approve a new payroll tax. So whether or not all these members are explicitly against this when it is on the ballot in November or whenever it might be, I don't know, but they're not so for it that they would take the initiative to pass something like this.
Fair. All right. Well, thank you very much for that. And David, we're going to take one last look at housing, perhaps the lack of it in the city of Seattle. David's got the scoop on why our city will be funding fewer affordable housing projects this year on What's Next. Well, heads up, listeners. We are going to keep asking for your input for our segment, You Ask, We Answer. Had a great session with that last week. Eric, thank you for that question. Any question you might have about local government, we need your emails. Send them our way. Send them to Seattle News, Views, and Brews at gmail.com. Spell all that out. Hopefully we'll have more questions to report on soon. Thank you for sending them in. But David, on this affordable housing issue, you reported in the Seattle Times about this. The city will not be funding as many of these projects here in 2024. Why is that?
Because the projects that they have already funded need more money is kind of what it comes down to. There are a few other reasons. I think that some sense of how much money they were spending per year was inflated a bit in the last few years because of emergency measures. And Office of Housing says they're holding some in reserve because they've got their own properties that they want to develop later in the year. But at the end of the day, it's that they had funded a lot of affordable housing projects over the last few years. There's around 70 kind of at some stage of development. And for a lot of different reasons, inflation, delays, cost of supply, those projects need more money. And so rather than funding to the level that we're used to in the past, funding new projects to the level
new ones,
past, they're spending on the old ones because, if those run out of money, that's kind of a wasted investment, and you've lost a lot of homes. It's not ideal for affordable housing developers who are eager to build more, but it kind of is what it is.
Yeah, and I thought you raised some very important money questions behind what was going on here in terms of what the future looks like for affordable housing. So housing levy dollars, we got those. Voters approved that last year, so that's pretty stable. But then permits for housing projects, which bring in a lot of money, those aren't looking all that great right now. That's one issue. And then that amount of money that goes from the Jumpstart payroll tax into affordable housing, That seems a little bit up in the air right now with this new council potentially using Jumpstart to plug some holes in the general fund. Can you talk about that, kind of this, where the dollars for affordable housing are going to come from for the city in the future? And are we going to start spending more money on that in years to come, or where is that dollar amount going to go?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of summed it up well. There's those three main sources of funding for affordable housing, and like you said, one of them is going to be a lot bigger now. Although, the amount that those dollars buy is going to be a lot less than maybe the past levy for same
Just
reasons.
To interject here, David, I thought it was interesting with the housing levy, triple the size of the old one, but still its buying power is just about the same as the one that we had before. I just wanted to make sure I threw in that fact to it. Keep going.
No, exactly. And, I was covering transportation for a long time, and that was kind of the story behind every construction project is just costs a lot more. But yeah, I mean, the mandatory housing affordability contributions are down, and they're going to probably continue to go down. And the Jumpstart tax is theoretically set aside for housing, but not legally. Whereas you can't spend housing levy dollars on budget deficit. You can spend housing levy. You can spend Jumpstart dollars to close the budget if you want. You have to pass. Council would have to do a couple things, but that's no problem. So I don't know that that's guaranteed. The Jumpstart goes towards that. I know that the city is doing some exercises around what it would look like to cut departments, but that would in some ways be mathematically the easiest thing to do this year. More broadly, I would say that I don't know that this problem is going to go away. I think I'll be curious. I think this is going to be something that these housing levy dollars are going to have to deal with for a few years to come, because as I understand it, a lot of these affordable housing projects are having a really hard time moving from their construction loan, which is a really expensive loan to be on, to their final loan. A couple things you have to do to be able to do that, as far as how many people are in your building and paying rent. And they're having a hard time making that switch. And so if they don't make that switch soon, this is a problem that's going to keep compounding on itself. And so suddenly we're looking at, as you mentioned, the housing levy dollars aren't going to buy that much more than the housing levy before it. If we have to keep backfilling existing projects, it's going to buy even less.
Wow. Yeah, you talk about compounding, very literally so, in terms of the interest rates these projects are paying for. So, there's a lot of different pieces involved there, David, and I really appreciate what you wrote there in the Times about this, because, this is an issue for a new council where they've got to learn really quickly some intricacies of how housing works and how it doesn't work sometimes in terms of the dollars that go in. But, a bit of a frustrating situation for sure, but one that we're going to keep an eye on as well right here on Seattle News, Views, and Brews. All right, it is time to wrap up, David. Multiple choice question to finish up here. Is February 14th a time to celebrate A, Valentine's Day, B, pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training, C, Ash Wednesday, or D, all of the above? What do you got?
My wife and I have never been big Valentine's Day people, so for me, pitchers and catchers reporting is a bigger holiday.
I knew it.
Now that we have a small kid, we might start using it more as more of an excuse, though, to get some babysitting. So maybe it'll become
there is that. You will thank yourself later. The adults need some time too. That is very much I think what Valentine's Day is all about. But hey, you know what? I like romanticizing about pitchers and catchers reporting too. It always seems like the best time of the year and time with the most hope. So we'll look at it that way too. David, thank you so much for joining me yet again. I hope you have a great Valentine's Day as well. Thanks to everybody listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Whether you're listening on February 14th or any time during this week, you can always find out what's brewing in local politics right here. Thanks especially to our patrons who support the show. Please get in touch and send us some questions. Seattle News, Views, and Brews at gmail.com. This podcast is on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen, we are there. Please find Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon, too, and show your support. Thanks for watching on Converge Media as well. We'll see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2024.